Profiling your characters is important. And the reason for that is, if you don't put up a profile or description of your characters might end up all being the same, acting the same, speaking the same way in your firm. Hi, I'm Isaac, and this is How to Write Your Screenplay, a step-by-step guide. Profiling your characters is very important because you need to know, and your viewers need to know, the difference between your characters. If your viewer cannot see a difference between your characters, they won't know which character is which. And it's important that they can see the difference or the distinction between your characters. The writers of South African amateur films, normally the character seems the same, act the same, speak the same, do the same things. And when you look at the writers of those films, you look at their behavior, the way they speak, it is just as the characters speak. There's no difference between the writer and the characters. So that shows that the writer did not even look at his characters, did not even look at what type of person his character should be. Now you might ask, how do I profile my characters? Start with yourself. Look at yourself. Who and what you are. What you believe. What you like to do and what you don't like to do. Look at the clothes you like to wear. Look at how you do things. Look at how you react towards other people. Now when you look at myself, this is one of the things I like to do. Gardening. You look at my clothes. This is how I like to be dressed, working. I like to be comfortable. I like to work unhindered. And that was also the way I was in my job. And if you go to many of the children I taught in the past, they will tell you, I like to work people to death. Not that I work them to death, but they said I work them to death. Another characteristic of myself is my wife, my child, and people who know me. They will tell you I'm stingy. For those people who don't know what stingy means, I don't like to spend money. I don't like to waste money. But there's one other characteristic of myself. I care for my family. I want to do the best for my family. Now when you look at my physical appearance, I am not that tall. I am going gray. So you can see my age. So I'm 59 turning 60. I have a big stomach. Yeah, I didn't used to have it, but I have it now and I'm trying to get rid of it. And working in the garden helps with that. Another characteristic of mine is they get very angry very fast if I find myself in the company of stupid people. Especially people who pretend that they are smart, but when they open their mouths, it's clear they don't know what they're talking about. I can't take it. Now, some people say I have one bad characteristic, a very bad one. I can't shut up when I see something wrong. Even when I see people want to defend their nonsense or what they are saying, even though they themselves might know it is stupid. I just can't take it, especially in the workplace. I can't take it. And I can't take people who want things but they don't want to work for it. Another characteristic of mine that people might say is a bad characteristic. Now remember, people say I'm stingy. But sometimes I don't mind giving money to these car guards. The people who watch our cars in parking areas or in the streets before a shop. Now the reason for that is, although I find them sometimes to be an irritation, I've seen too many times that people's cars got damaged by someone who bumped into their cars and they just drove away. Now these car guards, when you treat them well, They would tell you who bumped into your car. They would even give you the number plate of the car. That's why I don't really like to be rude to them, even though they irritate me sometimes. Another characteristic of mine is I don't like to be disturbed when I work. One principal once came to my class and wanted to speak to me, and I told him, "Sir, just wait a few minutes until I finish what I am busy with." Because I was teaching at that point in time, and to pick up a lesson when disturbed, when you lost the learner's interest, is very difficult. So I had to tell him to wait a minute, even though he didn't like it. Now, how do you profile your characters? Just like I profiled myself now. He gave you a character description of myself. Now, when you look at James Bond, but before we get to James Bond, let me tell you about something that happens at our church bazaar every year. There's a certain table at the bazaar of a certain circle that sells my sister-in-law's cakes. Now, in the past, people would go to the elder or the deacon and they would pay for the cakes before the bazaar. Then they stopped it. They wanted to give everyone a chance to get the cakes at the bazaar. But now what happens is, when people get to the bazaar, before the bazaar even starts, people would go to the table and buy cakes before the cakes even arrive. And the cakes at the other tables would stand and wait until the cakes of my sister-in-law has been sold out. Even the local taste neighborhood, their cakes don't sell as fast as my sister-in-law's. Now why is that? For those people who don't know Afrikaans, taste neighborhood is the local home industry where women sell their goods, like cakes and the things they make. Now why is it that people want my sister-in-law's cakes? I don't know, because everybody that bakes use the recipes. They use the same ingredients, but there's just something to a cakes that draws people to it. And it's probably because a mixture she makes is different, or the time she leaves the cake in the oven to bake. I don't know. All I know is that the cake sells out before the other tables every year. As a writer, an aspiring writer, amateur filmmaker, you want the same to happen. You want people to watch your films. And why would people watch your films if the story is weak, if the characters are all the same, or every scene is filmed in the same way? Why would people want to watch your films? There must be something different to your films than other films. There must be something different from your latest film that is different from your other films. I know it's difficult to do that, but there's always a few things that you have to look at when you write your script. Now let me get back to our original topic. The name is Bond, James Bond. And my question is, why is James Bond or the films so popular? Why is he seen as the coolest spy in the world? When you look at the character of James Bond, or you watch him on screen, there are obviously things that you can see about him that makes him so popular. Now, before I continue, I would certainly lack in my duty if I don't tell you this. Amateur writers, aspiring filmmakers, amateur filmmakers, they all make the same mistake, and that is telling their story and not showing their story. When you look at the Bond films, it's a clear case of show and not tell. It's a clear case of show and not tell. And every aspiring writer, every aspiring filmmaker, every amateur should learn that lesson. Show and don't tell. Everything that you learn about James Bond in the Bond films was not told to you through the dialogue, but through the actions of the character. And if you look carefully at the films, you will find all the characteristics of James Bond portrayed through actions and not through the dialogue. Now, you have to look at James Bond's characteristics to see why James Bond acts the way he does in the films, why he do the things he does in the film, and most importantly, why he can do it. That's very important. Your viewer need to know why it is possible for your character to do certain things. And you should not tell them through the dialogue. You must show them. Now in the Bond films, or in some Bond films, you will see James Bond in a Navy uniform. You will see James Bond jumping off high cliffs. You will see James Bond chasing after one of the henchmen of the villain. You will see James Bond's expertise with guns. You will see how James Bond arms and disarms bombs. You can see it in the films. You don't have to be told that James Bond can do those things. Now let us go through the characteristics of James Bond as it is portrayed in the films. Number one, James Bond is obviously intelligent. When he speaks like an intelligent person. His words are measured and always to the point and make sense. He is cunning. When you see James Bond in action, it might seem as if he just rushed into things. But it depends on the situation. James Bond is very cunning. He knows every trick in the book to ensure that he puts himself in danger, but he makes sure that he don't get killed. He would play around with the enemy like a cat with a mouse, giving them leeway just to make sure he entangles them properly in the rope. James Bond is also sound of mind. He don't act rash. He don't do stupid things just for doing it. And as I said before, everything is measured. He don't go crazy when he goes after the villains. Oh, in some cases he did. He has no psychological defects. Even though M1 said he went mad. Then he's arrogant. And that you can see especially in his actions towards the villains, towards other people, especially towards women. And that comes to the point also that James Bond is a womanizer. You can see it how he plays with women in the films. When you look at James Bond as a person, his physicality, you can see why it is like that. Number one, he was a naval officer. Number two, he had training as a secret agent. He had training in using weapons. He's muscular. He's athletic. He has martial arts skills, which means he was trained in the martial arts. And then, obviously, his military skills. That's why he's comfortable with guns. That's why he is comfortable with arming bombs and disarming bombs. And that also tells you why he is so fit. That is his physical characteristics. Then you can also see what his hobbies are. Number one, he loves expensive drinks. He drinks champagne from the Champagne area in France. He drinks his martini, shaken and not stirred. He likes to eat expensive foods, caviar, things like that. Then, he's also an adrenaline junkie. He loves fast cars. The faster, the better. And then, also, he likes to climb mountains, it seems. Because in one film, you see him jump off a mountain with a parachute, of course. He's a good swimmer. You saw him many times underwater in a diving suit, especially when he went to the operational submarine of theirs. You can see it. It's not told that he can do those things. It's not told in the dialogue, even sometimes in the dialogue. When an opposite agent is asked if they know James Bond, they would name some of these characteristics of James Bond. But most of the time you are shown it. They don't tell it to you through the dialogue. James Bond's appearance. Did you ever see him dirty? Even after a fight? He would just dust himself off, but his clothes would always look fresh and ironed. His jackets, his pants, always neat. So James Bond is always well dressed. James Bond always look handsome. No matter what type of clothes he is wearing. And then he's always formal. Always formal. Even in an informal situation, he always looks formal. So you can see, through these characteristics of James Bond, you can see why he acts in a certain way, why he do things in a certain way, why he speaks in a certain way in the films. You won't hear James Bond speak like the average Joe. Never. His words are always formal, measured. When he walks, his stride is measured. It's always measured. Even if he's in a hurry, even if he's following the henchman. So, disarming bombs in the films, driving fast cars, climbing mountains, swimming in the ocean underwater, all those things he can do because it's part of his profile or his characteristics. It would be good for aspiring writers, aspiring filmmakers, amateur writers and filmmakers to follow these guidelines, especially when it comes to the characters. And drawing up such a profile or characteristics of characters would help the characters to be different from one another in the stories, in their films. That distinction is very, very, very important. That's why I said, start with yourself. Look at what type of person you are. Look at what type of clothes you wear and why you wear those clothes. Are your shoes always clean? Do you act nicely towards women or towards girls? Do you speak intelligently or do you speak average slang? Those are the things you must look at. Your physical appearance, your body build. Write down the characteristics of yourself and you will be able to write down the characteristics of your characters. And then you will write those characters in your story according to those characteristics. If it's a girl that don't care about herself, you will see it in the clothes she wears, in the way she acts, in the way she speaks on screen, and not having it told about her through the dialogue. Show and not tell. That is very, very important. You must try to show and not tell. So, how do you do it? How do you learn to show and not tell? Firstly, you need to know people. You need to know why people do things, why they would not do things, why people dress in a certain way, why people walk in a certain way. You have to know those things. I don't say go and study psychology. You can look at the people around you, look at your friends, look at the actions, their gestures, look at the clothes and why they wear those clothes. It's so very important when it comes to designing your characters. I am Isaac and this is How to Write a Screenplay, a step-by-step guide. In the next episode, we will go into your villain and your hero in your story, in your film, and why the distinction between the two of them is so very important. Until next time, good writing.